Hello, Internet. This is the Romney's discussion version of Ghostbusters. This is the one that has spoilers. So if you care about spoilers and don't want to be spoiled, go back and watch the other review. Click on the annotation that you see right here, because this is the one for spoilers. Now, if you're probably wondering why it's audio only, well, the camera died while we were recording, and so we figured rather than trying to basically wait for the battery to charge and do it all over again,
Yep.
and end up being here until like midnight, we'd have figured, okay, we'll do this one audio only while we essentially wait for our camera battery to charge. So
That might be the best way to go about it. And that also helps with the editing process for Romney. So
yeah, and so to kind of once again explain, I'm Stephen Romney, I'm the main host, and the other voice you're hearing is Adam Mickelson, who you may recognize from the Geek News Reviews and Opinions podcast.
Yep.
And so with Ghostbusters, if you've seen our main review, you kind of already know where we stood when it came to our opinions of it as it was coming out, kind of where we were coming from in the franchise, and just kind of our general thoughts of it. So here we're going to get into the actual specific issues that we had with the film, actually pointing out the specific moments, specific problems, and specific things that we liked, without the worry of having of spoiling the movie for some other people, because if you're still watching at this point, you've probably either already seen the movie or just don't care.
Whereas the review that we're doing is kind of staying professional as we do with Romney's review. This is going to be, at least as far as I'm concerned, a little more off
Yeah, a little more. Yeah, it's going to be a little more free form.
And so, can I just preface this really quick before the haters just come down on me? I already know that I'm going to get the comments, and I absolutely walked into this movie wanting to like it. I wanted a good Ghostbusters movie in 2016 for numerous reasons. And so the fact that I'm coming down the way I am is shocking to me. Like, you and me walked out of the theater,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, people are going to hate me. But I didn't intend for that to happen.
Yeah, and I guess it's because I came in with much lower expectations, where I was worried that the film was just going to be pretty much every bad comedy that's come out in this past decade alone.
Probably.
Where the filmmakers just have no faith in their audience to actually understand anything, that I ended up being pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, and for me, it was, I had gone in checking my brain at the door. I was not going to compare it or anything like that. I started to compare it in the middle of the theater, but I would always kind of bounce back to that. And every time something, to me, that would be dumb would happen, I would just be like, it's okay. We still got... This thing has, like, an hour left to be able to prove that wrong. And then the time limit just kept on getting shorter and shorter. And it never got to that point of redemption for me. And so at that point, I literally came in wanting to check my brain at the door and just have a good popcorn flick to enjoy. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen.
Yeah,
so,
and for me, that's kind of what I got, but it was in spite of some of the things I brought up, the fan service, the jokes that were pretty much the whole, let's take Bridesmaids, because this is the director of Bridesmaids, we got to force these elements in. And I don't know whether that would have been the executives or if it was Paul Feig himself, but there were some things I did like about this movie, and since this isn't spoiler one, I can actually bring them up now. I did like the climax, like at least parts of the climax where you had the main villain, I can't remember his actual name.
I don't think we ever found it out.
Yeah, but basically, we'll just call him Evil Bellboy, because that's
more I was about to call him Ivo Shandor, because that's the supposed villain in the first movie. And this guy was supposed to be, like, totally into the occult, so I'm like, he's Ivo Shandor, I guess.
Yeah, and so, I mean, as a villain, he was a little bit iffy, but at least his motivations were clear. And so it wasn't even the case that, that it was just a comedic foil. It's like, okay, this is a character with a clear motivation. He's obviously trying to do something. And as someone who used to actually be into the occult and into, like, things like dowsing and ley lines, I did like how they actually try to bring in some of the... like parascience stuff into it, because that was something that I know that they have in the original Ghostbusters, because Dan Aykroyd's father, Peter Aykroyd, was actually into the occult, was actually a ghost research scientist. That's why he wrote Ghostbusters. And so I like that they did try working that in, like, he's putting these more, for lack of a better term, ghost bombs on points of a ley line, so that way at the point where the ley lines intersect, that's where the big scary portal, the apocalypse thing will happen. I'm just like, okay, they actually did some research. They actually found a way to actually work in some of these, I don't want to say pseudoscience, because I know that sounds kind of harsh. I mean, yeah, I'm a skeptic now, but I know there are some people out there who do believe in this stuff and will probably want to eviscerate me if I call it that, but I liked how they worked in some of those supernatural, paranormal, like science-ish stuff into the film.
No, I like that, and I'll tell you from two different perspectives why I liked it. I liked it from the lore perspective. That makes sense, and it is in a lot of paranormal stuff. I liked it because it kind of referenced back to the first movie where we have, a lot of people don't like the scene now, but it's a big exposition dump, where Egon is basically explaining all of the research that he has done on the building, so to speak, and he goes into Evo Shandor and how he was doing horrible rituals and things like that. That's how it felt when they described it to me. The other thing that made me really like it was Ghostbusters, the video game, where they actually did something similar to this, where like people were tapping into the alternate portals and using the ley lines to be able to power them. Because I can't spoil this game. It's past its spoiler limitations because it's Evo Shandor in movie 3 because I guess the original script for movie, or one of the original scripts for movie 3 was Evo Shandor was going to be the villain. He was going to come back from the dead, and that's what they did here. Is like he was manipulating the ley lines and being able to magnify the power of this portal to bring hell on Earth, roughly. So I love that concept. For that whole 10 minutes that we got it.
Mm-hmm. And the one thing I did like, and this was the only fan-servicey moment that I felt actually made a little bit of sense, and that was when the main villain of this film was basically like taunting them and taking on, like he got out of Kevin's body, but was hovering above the portal and kind of taunting them, and then Patty pretty much said, "Oh, I prefer something smaller, a little more friendly," and he turns to the Ghostbusters logo, and then the nose sign turns a little bow tie, and then that becomes like the larger giant monster. I'm thinking, okay, that's a unique way to kind of
believe it or not, that was another tie. That's one of those nods that I thought was to the real Ghostbusters, because there was a ghost very similar to the look of that in the real Ghostbusters in one episode.
Yeah, and I liked that because it took something that was established but actually did its own unique twist on it, where it's like, oh, this isn't just the logo they use. This is the logo, it's familiar, and then it basically turns into the final boss of the movie.
Yeah, pretty much. And I would kind of agree with you on that one. So, let's just get into the fan servicey stuff and the stuff we dislike, because I really just want to get into it. I have 3 major dislikes with this film, and one of them is the fan service. First of all, I love the original Ghostbusters cast, but all of the cameos drove me nuts. Okay, I'm going to be 100% honest here. Here are the cameos that I liked and that I thought made sense. Harold Ramis, bust. That was awesome. That should have been in the movie.
And it was subtle.
That was way better than the end credit where we saw 4 Harold Ramis. Because the bottom line is that it's Harold Ramis in the movie, which we weren't going to get. So I love that one. The second was Dan Aykroyd. And the reason I like that one was because it was a cab driver who actually mentioned a Class 5 spectral anomaly in a Brooklyn accent. I love that concept, and so that was a good cameo as far as I was concerned. The other one I would actually bring up was that didn't piss me off too bad, was the one you brought up, where he was the Ghostbusters logo and he was cute and cuddly, and then he became all evil. But then we had, for crying out loud, we had Bill Murray, who was basically the Walter Peck of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I found it funny. He's dickless in this movie. He's dickless. We had Ernie Hudson, which we'd actually debated on Geek News whether or not he had been offered anything. We hadn't heard anything.
Yeah, it was.
So they flew it in under the radar, and man, was he wasted.
Mm-hmm. And Sigourney Weaver, especially that one. Even that one made me kind of mad, because I'm just like, why is she here?
I saw it and bam, just right to my forehead, and I actually irritated the guy next to me when that happened. Slimer is obviously a reference.
Mm-hmm.
And
the Stay Puft Marshmallow Balloon.
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. We also had, there was one more cameo in there. Janine, the original Janine. She was the receptionist in the hotel.
Yeah.
And again, wasted, because it was just her being average New Yorker.
It was pretty much the movie going saying, hey, they were in the original movie. You like us now, right? Please like us.
You will like this, we will shove it down your throat. That's what was happening with it. And then on top of that, all of the fan servicey moments where we had, it just so happened that the guy on the subway sprayed the Ghostbusters logo.
Yeah.
And then it just so happened that the engineer girl took the car to get remodeled to be the Ecto-1. Which is funny, because I don't think in the entire movie ectoplasm was ever used as a term. So how on earth did they come up with Ecto-1? You know?
Because it was in the original. That's pretty much the only explanation.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying, like... And also, some of it just confused me, because, again, there were points where I'm like, is this supposed to be a reference to the movie, or is it supposed to be a reference to the cartoon? And especially with the Ghostbusters logo moment, I was like, wait, is that... What are you trying to do here? Are you trying to reference the movie, or are you trying to reference the cartoon? Which is this supposed to be a successor to? And the confusion just already irritated me.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time we got to the last cameo, the cameos are the biggest problem here.
Mm-hmm.
By that last cameo, I was about ready to scream in the theater, wait, you forgot Rick Moranis! Wait, you forgot the original Walter Peck! Wait, you forgot the mayor of New York! Wait, you forgot this guy! Wait, you forgot Vega! You forgot them all! And at that point, you might as well just shove them all down my throat. You're shoving so many others down my throat.
And especially with how those scenes with those cameos, the movie just grinds to a halt.
Yes.
At those moments. And that's why it bothered me, because I'm just like, hey, I mean, especially, I didn't really like the Dan Aykroyd one. I mean, and I'm kind of in the opposite. I liked the Bill Murray one, because they at least gave the character something to do, and it kind of moved the story forward. It wasn't just, oh, I'm Bill Murray, bye. It was like a case of, okay, he's a skeptic, he comes in.
I don't hate the concept, but again, he was Walter Peck to me.
Yeah.
That's what he was.
Yeah, and pretty much at least with Bill Murray, it moved the story forward, because you at least saw, some of the characters. You saw Melissa McCarthy's character. The sad part is I don't remember any of their names. That's the other problem here, is that...
The only one you remember is Patty. Why do you remember it? Because she wore bling on her neck that said Patty.
Yeah.
That's how you remember it. I don't remember Kristen Wiig's character. I don't remember Melissa McCarthy's. And I certainly don't remember the engineer girl. I don't.
Yeah.
I think her last name was Holowitz, and that's it.
Yeah. And that's kind of part of the problem there, is that although you don't really remember, you at least got to see kind of the motivations a little bit in that particular scene, where you got to see Kristen Wiig's character be the one like, oh, well, we have it right here, let's prove it to him right now. And then you've got Melissa McCarthy's character being the voice of reason, like, no, we don't know what will happen if we let this thing out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you literally, like, at least there you got to see, okay, you see two characters who both eventually want to prove that ghosts are real, but you actually see, like, characters going about it in different ways, which is something that in a lot of teen shows and teen movies in recent history, we don't really see anymore. Because, I mean, a good example, and again, this is going to get me punched, but with Gravity Falls, you have that problem where you basically have Pine and Mabel agreeing on the same thing and basically wanting to do the exact same thing, whereas and it's rare to actually see a team that disagrees with itself even though they both want the same thing. The only other time we saw this was with Avengers Civil War.
Yeah. Speaking of Avengers, that's another problem that I had with this movie. It was a major problem, which was, I think you know what I'm talking about, the fight scene. Okay, here's the problem I had with it. And again, comparison is horrible to do, but it's the best I got. In the original Ghostbusters, they were nothing but scientists. Mm-hmm. If there was anybody who knew how to fight, it was Winston Zeddemore of that team, because he knew New York. And so at that point, we had those moments where they looked badass and pulling out the proton packs and all that, and those were great. This one, I honestly thought Sony wanted this to be Ghostbusters Avengers. I really did, and it pissed me off. Because at that point, I'm not saying that was a good idea or a bad idea. I personally think it's a bad one. Just because these are supposed to be people who have taken their time not to tone their body, but to tone their mind. And so at that point, having them come out as these gun-toting badasses...
Yeah.
Just came off is what's the word I'm looking for? Unapologetic. It came off as mean-spirited. And it came off as, oh, we can totally make this as popular as the Avengers just by mimicking them.
Yeah, and that is one problem I did have with, like, the big, like, kind of ghost battle scene. Although it was cool watching them use the tech they developed, like watching them use the machineries they built looked cool until...
Well, they started with, it's Melissa McCarthy, right? The bigger one.
Mm-hmm.
So that I didn't have a problem with, because she was just basically, like, trying to throw them around and all that. That's what I would expect from a proton pack.
Well, yeah, and then, like, the proton grenades I kind of liked. I like that we saw the stuff they built and we saw them finally putting it to use, because that kind of brought it, okay.
And again, I didn't have a problem with that. It was when we had Kristen Wiig's character pull a Terminator 2 and fold out the pistol-looking one, and boom, and then we had Engineer Girl pull out the two pistols that were... proton pistols that were whips, I guess.
Yeah.
That's where it went way too far. Or no, you know what? I'll give Patty the credit there. I did like the whole Ghost Shredder.
Yeah, the Ghost Chipper was pretty cool.
But at that point, it's just like, are you trying to be Avengers now? because that's where you think you need this to go.
Yeah, and I mean, especially with the pistols and the shotgun thing, it kind of defied the internal logic. I mean, there's a reason the proton pack has to have a backpack on the back, because that's a lot of high energy you're having to pump into such a small space.
Yeah.
And they have nukes strapped to their backs. And yet they pull out the pistols.
And I love it when they went to the range, and it's just like, what the fuck? Are you Tony Stark now? You've got these tiny little arc reactors and all. These are all licensed nuclear accelerators. You're telling me that you basically took a nuclear reactor and made it the size of like a dime so that you could fit it into a pistol.
Yeah.
Really?
And I mean, the idea would have worked if they had actually treated it like pistols, where it wasn't a whip that they could just whip around, but if it was like a little short burst sidearm thing that was meant to just basically keep them at bay while you try to get away, much like how in an actual combat situation, that's what the sidearm is for with the pistol. I mean,
kind of like how the grenades worked.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's how they should have worked, just to be a momentary pulse to keep them in place for somebody to hit them with an actual proton pistol.
Mm-hmm.
Or to get proton pack,
or to stop them while they get the trap ready. Like, it could be a case of, it's coming at you. You have the trap right below you. You keep them back a little bit.
But the fact that they were like manifesting their own proton streams, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. Plus, and that's another thing. Like, one thing and it's a line I know from the movie, but it's something that I never really saw addressed, was the whole crossing the streams, because the thing is that I know in the original they explained that if you cross the streams, you'll basically wipe out the entire city because of the nuclear reaction.
Yeah, and the whole thing about that was Rey's selling him, full protonic reversal, which got referenced in this movie, but in a different way. This is like, full protonic reversal. And at that point, like, we knew it was dangerous, but then we were all from Peter Venkman's point of view, it was like, how dangerous is that? And then we had that explained, which is basically that they would invert matter, and it would basically create a ginormous nuclear explosion in New York. I think it would level the city.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem with those like pistols with the proton. I'm just like, okay, that is
but that was part of the humor of the original movie. I mean, the thing that set that up was turning on the packs for the first time and hearing that, and then all of a sudden in the elevator, I think it was Rey's that was on. Peter and Egon start slowly backing away from Rey because these are nuclear accelerators.
Yeah, and again, that was one problem I did have. Although I did like in the climax where like, we've got to drive the Ecto-1 into the pit because and basically charge the nuke to create
which
that
would
effect.
make sense.
Yeah,
that, like the same tech would be, because they have to use the Ecto-1 to power the packs. So that makes sense that it's a nuclear reactor.
And that decision actually felt like something. Okay, that's something that you would see thinking people who built these machines do. Like, it's basically a last-ditch effort. If we basically fire our proton packs at the Ecto-1 as it goes in, it'll trigger the reaction that we try to avoid. And
which instead of basically pushing all the ghosts out, it would suck all the ghosts in.
Mm-hmm.
And that made sense. Like, full protonic reversal right there. You actually gave justification to it.
Yeah, but then you get the other things. I mean, I was a bit wary of the whole, the Kristen Wiig character attaches the tow cable to herself to dive in after her friend. I mean,
that was so dumb.
I mean, it was it could have been done a little bit better. I personally, I would have let the portal close and then just maybe as like a little nod have that character come back as a ghost be helpful. I mean, I just think that would have been like a better way. Like, someone like basically made the ultimate sacrifice.
Well, let's just be 100% honest here. They hinted at a sequel. You could have just had the sequel be they go into the ghost world to get her back.
Yeah.
You know? Like, they could get, like, because you already knew the engineer was working on new tech to be able to trap ghosts. Then you have a whole new focus. She's now trying to find a way to get in. And whether or not that's the right thing to do, because then you're going to have the ghosts coming out.
Yeah, that would have been better than the sequel hook that we actually got, which was, what's Zool? And even there, I was with you that one, because, again, I know bits and pieces because of, like, the AVGN videos and the references people have made, and even I gotta agree, that's a dumb sequel hook.
Yeah, because that's basically referencing that if they did a Ghostbusters 2, which, it's Sony, as far as I'm concerned with this movie, they have the sequel lined up, and it's going to be Gozer. And at that point, I don't know if I necessarily want Gozer.
Yeah, although one sequel I would want to see, because they did set up the groundwork, even if they didn't intend to, crossing over with Men in Black. It would make sense, given that it's like, we keep these things quiet, and they mention stuff like Raw, so I'm thinking, that actually is a very good segue if they ever decide to relaunch Men in Black, because
and you sold me on it.
Yeah,
I like the idea.
Yeah, because what people don't remember is that the original comics that the movies are based on, which, for the record, weren't made by Marvel. Marvel simply bought out the imprint that published them. the Men in Black dealt with both aliens and the supernatural. The idea is that they had to keep all of these things suppressed and quiet so that the public wouldn't panic.
And the thing is, like, they dealt with the supernatural because sometimes the supernatural was alien influenced.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, it made sense for them to get connected. And so at that point, if they wanted to do a Men in Black Ghostbusters crossover, I wouldn't have had a single issue with that because it makes sense.
Yeah, and they established that sort of thing in this movie where you literally have the mayor of New York saying, hey, we have people working on this. Department of Homeland Security's been trying to keep this quiet, well, and we need to keep it quiet. And that's like, okay, there, you've got the setup. Sony has the rights to Men in Black. They can pretty much do it.
Yeah, and here's the thing.
It makes more sense than 21 Jump Street.
Oh yeah, that makes so much more sense than 21 Jump Street. So the other thing that I like, well, yeah, I mean, you're the one that's kind of dictating the pace here, but do we get into the characters at all, or?
Well, I think we already established the one thing is that we didn't remember any of the characters' names except for Kevin.
Well, the other, like I said, there are like 3 to 4 things that I didn't like about this movie, and one of them actually was both the humor and the writing for the characters. And so I think this is kind of a good way to go into the humor a little bit, because we kind of did in the review, but now we can full on talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Where this is just nothing but Seth MacFarlane level humor. I mean, so let's give a couple of examples. Anything with Kevin, was Seth MacFarlane, as far as I am concerned. The perfect example that actually pissed me the hell off was when they were approached by the Higgins Institute before they get kicked out, and the guy like literally spends 7 minutes trying to recreate Guardians of the Galaxy by flipping them off in unique ways.
Yeah.
And after the first couple of fingers, we got it. They were screwed, but they kept it going.
Yeah,
and I'm just like,
move
the hell on. So at that point, because I was completely uninvested in that scene as of that moment. Another perfect example of this would be, let's see, we had the middle finger deal.
Yeah,
we had anything involving Kevin. We had the whole soup deal with Melissa McCarthy.
The whole running gag with the Chinese restaurant.
How they can never get the right amount of wontons and everything like that. It's like, seriously, we're so sick and tired of the soup.
Yeah, I mean, especially after the amount of times they would, like, just go to a different Chinese place.
Mm-hmm. And the one thing that actually kind of killed this movie for me was, like, they had some really good character moments that got ruined by this humor. I mean, for crying out, I love the whole telling the story of Kristen Wiig's character saying how she met Melissa McCarthy's character. I love that. I thought that was great. How did they end it? By going into the TV stuff where Bill Murray is debunking them and how they hate that and how YouTube hates them. And it's just like, okay, you had a really good feel-good moment and you ruined it with your mean-spirited nature here.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the many problems. There was another moment that I was going to bring up, but I forgot it because it's just, and that's kind of the problem, is that you have a movie that's kind of at odds with itself, where you have half of it wanting to be a good Ghostbusters movie, and the other half basically being, oh, it's just Bridesmaids with ghosts.
Well, and you and me kind of came to an agreement, which is like, we don't hate these actresses. We think they're giving good performances. This looks more like it's a problem on the writing's end.
Yeah, writing and directing, because you can...
Yeah.
And that's pretty much where it really comes down to, because, I mean, aside from the fan service, you have it where they don't know what audience they're trying to reach. They don't know, it's like, oh, are we going to completely dumb ourselves down, or do we want to actually, like, tell a good story and be smart? And that's the big problem here, is that it's at odds with itself of what type of film it's trying to be. I mean, you can have some characters that aren't that smart, but still kind of contribute, like Patty, where she's just like... I mean, I especially like some of the jokes that were based on the logic of the character, like when they're in the concert hall and she sees the room back, it's like, room full of nightmares, not going in there. Like, okay, that
makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense, because that's like a horror movie trope.
And I mean, I especially like the whole, like, it's like, were you there before? Please don't answer that.
Well, one of the things that made me kind of laugh was the person next to us in the theater, or next to me, he looked at the mannequins, he went, oh my god, Silent Hill. So I was like, yeah, because I've never seen a single Silent Hill movie, but I know that scene of the mannequins coming to life. That's exactly what this is. And what even added to that was the fire that was coming off of it near the end. It was like, yeah, this is Hell Mannequin. I loved it. And even like some of the ghosts, their reveals were awesome as far as how they did it. I loved how they did the one woman from the Aldridge Mansion, and the guy who had gone to the electric chair loved the reveals of those characters.
Mm-hmm.
But then we had stupid humor interjected with them that kind of took away from their scenes.
Yeah. I mean, I did like the scene with the dragon, especially with the whole, like, nope, don't tell me anything. I'm just going to go lie down. Do not agitate. And then it was like, oh, she just doesn't know anything. And then it's like, oh, I see what she's doing. She's like, do not agitate the ghost.
Do not. And then all of a sudden, but let's see, here's the thing that added on to Patty's character. As soon as that thing's off her shoulders, oh, the gloves are off.
Mm-hmm.
You know? I love that concept. In fact, if I were to say, like, if there was a cast member that I legitimately liked, it'd probably be Patty.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because she is exactly Winston Zeddemore with that level of added into it, and it worked.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody else annoyed the living shit out of me. And it wasn't their fault. It was the writing was so dumb.
Because you can tell there's like good ideas for the characters. You got the eccentric who likes like building the machines, who's basically kind of the tomboy tinkerer, and then you've got the two, and then you've got this is where I kind of felt things kind of fell apart. The whole you have one that's supposed to be kind of the straight man, and then the person who's like into the ghost and actually like passionate about it. But that things got kind of muddled partway through because you're just like, okay, well we get they're on the same side, but now they're just turning into basically the same character.
Yeah, and I mean we go into this with a review where like I was trying to figure out who was the Venkman and who was the Stance and who was the Spangler. And then they would outright switch roles back and forth, and it was like, you know what? I can't even keep track of this anymore, and I had to do this in my head. You're Venkman because you keep getting slimed. You're Spangler because you apparently are dealing with all of the engineering crap, and you're the one that I'm sure is collecting spores in their spare time. And then Melissa McCarthy, you're the Ray Stance because you're the inspiration one of the group. Mm-hmm. Based on those concepts. And, well, Patty, you're Winston Zeddemore, and not just because of race. Because you are Winston Zeddemore. You are the negotiation there. They know science, you know New York. So at that point, I had to kind of make those sacrifices and those jumps. But another thing that hurt the writing is, again, this thing was so pro-women that, like, again, we talked about it in the review. Men are idiots as far as Ghostbusters is concerned. And you know what? I can kind of accept that. Sometimes men are idiots. Sometimes women are idiots. And this movie kind of showcases that. But holy crap, the girl power in this movie felt so...
It was forced.
It was forced, and it felt mean. It felt overall mean-spirited. Like, I literally felt like this movie was saying, if you hate this, you're a misogynist. No, I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, as I've even said in past reviews, just because something's being progressive, it doesn't mean it gets a free pass.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and this is coming from someone who actually ended up enjoying the movie despite some of its flaws, because what sold me was the climax and just kind of how it had the balance of scariness, of fear, of terror with humor. It had that nice balance that the film was trying to strike, and that moment was where it actually struck, but then it's...
Well, and here's the thing, too, is like, where I would want more practical effects in the next movie, the CG didn't necessarily piss me off in this. Like, the abuse... In most movies these days, there's such an abuse of CG. Mm-hmm. And you would think that would be like the first thing that, as a critic, that would piss us off. For me, that wasn't the case. Yeah. The ghosts looked really good.
Well, yeah, I liked the stylized look, and granted, that just might be because I've seen so many films so devoid of color that when you're seeing something that actually has color, that way you can actually see what the hell you're actually watching.
Well, do you want to know what added on to that concept? Is like when they had the horror vortex in the middle of New York, which added this green tinge to the whole city and changed the lighting of the whole thing. That worked. Mm-hmm. It felt like hell on earth. And so I was completely okay. And on top of that, the fact that everything had a ghostly aura, you couldn't tell what was ghost and therefore not real and what was real.
Well, yeah, especially when you would see it, and this was something I noticed that in the background, like when they're past like movie theaters, you would see the marquees would shift to like old movies where it's like, oh, Fist of Fury, oh, French Connection. You saw like bits and snippets of old New York kind of creeping in because it was, well, the ghost of New York.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't have a problem with the CG. If anything, it gave more color to this movie and therefore more color to the scenes. Mm-hmm. Especially in some cases where the ghosts were kind of an embodiment of what they used. Like the one woman from the Aldrich Mansion had kind of a green glow to her, and if you went into the basement would fill up with slime. The electric chair guy, he was blue because he was gonna shock people with it. Mm-hmm. I love those concepts, and I agree with you. It added more color to the film and therefore made it a little bit more enjoyable and bearable to be able to watch these scenes go through.
Yeah, because you can actually tell what the hell is going on. Because, I mean, take notes, Zach. That's how you're supposed to do it.
Oh, we're going to get into that at some point, because I already know at least one of us has seen the ultimate cut. But,
yeah.
So at that point, so I've gone into two of the, well, technically there's four. So I did not like all the fan service because it made this film not feel like a movie, but more like a marketing statement.
It felt
marketing
insecure,
campaign.
Basically.
Well, it didn't feel like a movie. It felt like a marketing campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Like one that you would get on YouTube where it's just being hammered down your throat endlessly.
Mm-hmm.
My perfect example would be, I don't know how many times I've seen trailers for The Purge, and I'm so sick and tired of that movie now, and I've never even seen it.
Yeah.
So the writing and the acting is another one. That final scene, or the final battle, or the war with the ghost, that bothered me. And then finally, just the further referencing into Zool and Gozer being the villain.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I want Sony to clarify this. Is this set in the universe, or is it its own thing? Because why does Gozer have to be the villain?
Yeah. And especially when you have the whole, how does the cab driver know about all, like, the whole, like, Class 5 thing? Like, is this supposed to be a follow-up, or is this a reboot? And that, I kind of heard, it's like, okay, how the hell does this cab driver know about, like, specifically using their terminology?
See, I like that reference just because it felt like, out of nowhere that he went into Ray's stance for a second. And I was okay with that. But at that point, I could agree with you. It feels out of character for this cab driver to know that.
Yeah, I mean, unless it was specifically teasing, and that was the other thing that kind of bothered me with the whole, like, I get that they couldn't rent the firehouse, but then kind of getting it at the end, I think if they had stuck with the whole, in the Chinese restaurant, because that's their base of operations, and proving, okay, we're not exactly like the old ones, but at the very end, it's like, oh, we've got the firehouse, oh, and there's Winston.
And there's Winston, yeah. And so at that, I think I pretty much covered, like, all the major problems that I had with this movie that made it, I would have moments where I was totally into it. I was completely fine with the steps that they were taking, and then the mean-spiritedness would come up, and then the overflowing of fan service, and then the bad writing would make its presence known, and it took me out of the movie, and I couldn't enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's why I feel this is on the opposite perspective of Gem, because while Gem had glimmers of things that wanted to be a unique concept, a unique take on the original story, with the pointless music, shoehorned, like, show business stuff hammered in. Here it has kind of the opposite, where you have a film that's wanting to have its own identity, but then you have all the pointless fan service that keeps pulling it back, trying to basically make it like something else.
Or in some cases, like the humor in the fan service, almost feeling hateful to a point where you can enjoy it just because you feel uncomfortable enjoying it. I can't compare it to Gem, but I will compare it to other comedies that I've seen this year. So, like, I'm going to compare it to the other bad comedy that I've seen this year, which is Hail Caesar. Where Hail Caesar's humor felt dumb, it didn't feel mean-spirited. And therefore, I could at least enjoy it for being dumb humor. In this case, like, where they had the YouTube comments. Guys, that totally...
It's low-hanging fruit. It really is.
It's low-hanging fruit, and it's frankly something that you were better for not doing.
Yeah, they should have taken the high road, but they didn't.
Yeah, and you totally could have taken the high road and made... I mean, if you wanted to read a smart or a comment, then fine, just make a smart humor kind of deal out of it. They got a real idiot, which they didn't really do that. They dug out a hateful idiot.
Yeah, and I mean, especially, and the line that also bothered me is and it was with Sigourney Weaver's cameo at the end, where she's like looking at the equipment, it's like, oh, you need safety lights. Like, safety lights are for men, and I'm just like, really?
This, I hate to make this comparison, and I'm probably going to get comments for it. This movie is more sexist than me not liking it.
Yeah, and that's really the problem, is that if they had pretty much gone their own identity and cut out all the fan service and cut out a lot of the whole... If they basically wrote their idiots better, and to the point where there at least was an internal logic to their idiocy, it would have been a really good film if it was allowed to actually take on its own identity.
Dude, some of Kevin's humor could have been rewritten. Like, Chris Hemsworth's humor could have been rewritten because at that point, he's Beefcake, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. And honestly, the route I would have taken, although I'm not sure how well it would have gone, rather than having the evil bellhop, I would have held off on revealing the villain until the very end and have it be where Kevin was the villain, was the one doing it, and he just
because it would make sense. He was playing dumb the entire time. That would have been awesome, but no, we couldn't do that. We had to have him possessed.
Yeah.
To be evil.
And I mean, granted, some of the jokes of the whole I should have worked out while I was alive. That at least that got a little bit of a chuckle out of me.
Yeah, no, that was fine. I was completely okay with that joke. I'm like, I should have worked out more when I was alive.
Yeah, I don't know what is it about mediocre movies that seem to at least have villains that are at least enjoyable. Because at least even when it was just like the weird nerds, like okay, this villain has like you at least know what he's doing. You know what he's trying to do, and he actually like has a character that actually is basically. It's like with Harry Plinkett's reviews of the prequels where the Emperor has a clear goal they're working towards. This villain had a clear goal they were working towards.
Well, but the other thing that I would bring up is, like, he's a better Ghostbusters villain. And the reason I would point that out is because most of the time in a Ghostbusters series or movie, the villains are perceived as stupid because they're in the thrall of the mind control of their master kind of thing. Perfect example is Ghostbusters 2, how we had the one guy who was trying to work for Viega, and yet he was a blaring idiot. You know, he was Renfield, is what he was. And that's how a lot of them turned out. And so in this case, we had a legit smart villain. That's why in a lot of cases, I thought it would have been a great reveal to have him be like, have him be almost immortal. Like he's a guy who's been doing a whole lot of occult stuff. Maybe he's gotten an elongated life because of it. But I like the fact that it was a geeky and a smart villain.
Yeah, one who was using literally their playbook, using all the research that they had amassed and published.
Yeah, and twisting it to his own means. So, but at the same time, he was also a relatable villain because this guy was the janitor of a hotel, and he got pretty much shat on the entire movie.
Yeah, and implied that he was shat on his entire life, which is why he wanted to basically bring hell on Earth, because like, well, these people treated me like crap, so I'm gonna basically trigger the apocalypse and kill everyone.
Yeah, I mean, like when he came up to Patty in the subway, he's like, in the forthcoming apocalypse, you know, blah 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 blah. I was like, so you're Vince Clortho? Because that's how that came off. Like when Rick Moranis is possessed in the first movie, like, so you're possessed already. And then we realized, no, he's doing this of his own volition. He's doing this because it's his own decision. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I like to call one of the many missed opportunities, because they had really good villains, which is what made the climax really intense, because it wasn't being like, oh, it's the devil they're dealing with. It's literally, oh, this was a human who triggered all of this and is now using his newfound abilities to basically wreck even more of the city.
I will actually say this as kind of a criticism to him. Letting the power go to his head a little bit was probably a bad decision. I love the whole concept of the working out, but when he literally made people freeze into a dance position, when we saw, like, the scene before that was when we saw all of the images that he had drawn in the book, and it was literally him as a demon trying to wreck the city. It felt like, okay, as a guy who's like totally obsessed with revenge, would he really go on this power trip, or would he cut to the chase?
Yeah, and the sad part is, I thought them pointing in the air was actually going to lead to something else. Because the fact that they were all pointing in the same direction, maybe he's trying to, I don't know, use their bodies to like channel more energy for like the final.
Do you know what I honestly thought was going to happen? Sony owns Thriller. I thought they were going to do the Thriller dance.
Yeah, and that was the kind of the disappointing thing, because I thought, they're all pointing in the same direction. Maybe that's significant. Like, maybe that's like the last part of his plan, where he has to basically have so much focus drawn to like a specific spot to basically bring in the last of the big bads. But nope, it was for a dance number that I get the feeling was pushed to the end credits because they realized it was stupid in the film proper.
How dumb it was. Yeah, and so at that point, I love this villain, but that one moment where he let the power go to his head a little bit, that I think detracted, especially when we went right back into that where he was being the subtle villain again, becoming the Ghostbusters logo. Okay, but like in the meantime, he was like walking past the pillars and saying, well, what form would you like me to take, kind of thing, and being that villain again. I'm like, then why do we just spend 10 minutes with you making everybody get into a disco pose?
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, especially since it led nowhere. Especially if they were gonna just have it be incapacitated, he should have just had it be like, okay, just knock them all out. Just would have knocked them all. It basically, they had the groundwork there, but again, that points out the problem where it felt like they didn't have faith in their own audience.
I guess what we're basically saying here is, like, because I'll bet if we actually looked at the script, we both could carve out like a good solid 30 minutes out of this film. There's a lot of unnecessary to it, and we could have easily cut a lot of the jokes shorter, and they would have had more staying power.
Yeah, and reworked some of the concepts that had potential that were just underutilized.
Exactly, and so at that point, that's one of the things that I even said this to my wife when I came home last night. It was like, I don't feel that this is a bad movie. I feel it's trying too hard to be a good movie. And at that point, it's not like so bad it's silly. It's bad it's painful.
Yeah, and the way I kind of put it, at least in like my initial write-up I wrote on my own, is that the film is passable, but it's held back by a lot of these other problems, like the fan service, the mean-spiritedness. It's basically... The way I put it in the write-up is that it's a decent movie, but it has all this baggage that's keeping it from being a good movie.
Yeah, so at that point, like, let's just say for the sake of argument, because it's Sony, this is happening. If you're going to do a sequel, get a new writing staff, as far as I'm concerned, because I really do think that if you bring this writing staff again, and given how much hatred that's going to come out of this movie, they're going to be coming in with a grudge. Bring in a brand new writing staff that is not offended by half of the comments that have come out on YouTube and Twitter about it. So that would be like the one thing that I would do. Second, you've done so many cameos, don't do any more.
Yeah.
Don't do
the horse is dead.
The horse is dead, has been resurrected with a voodoo ritual, has been beat over the head numerous times so that it's dead again. Don't do cameos.
Yeah.
This is a comedy, not an action movie.
I mean, you can do action comedy, but you have to keep it consistent.
But you have to make it as silly as Melissa McCarthy was, not as serious as Engineer Girl was.
Yeah, and that's the real problem. And it's also, the action needs to be consistent within the logic of its own universe. I mean, like, showing them using the tech that we saw tested earlier, that made sense. Showing the ghost chipper, having Patty use the ghost chipper, that made sense. Because, like, okay, this is the payoff. We saw them basically work through trying to get this stuff to work, and now we're actually seeing it in action.
Let the badass characters be badass. And in this case, it's Patty. Patty was the badass character. All of these other characters are scientists regardless. So at that point, to see them, like, fight things smarter would have been more interesting. Like, having Kristen Wiig, like, literally have, like, a big trail of ghosts behind her and then light a grenade.
Yeah, and
that would have made more sense.
And one thing I did like was how they more or less had to constantly save each other. Like, as soon as one took one down, they got snagged, and, like, you saw the teamwork. And I'm thinking, if they had more of that, where it's like, oh, like, we have to keep basically saving each other's asses throughout this whole excursion, that would have worked.
And not even necessarily saving with the proton packs. Like I said, you could have this entire army of ghosts following Kristen Wiig, and then Melissa McCarthy's like, wait, do you still have a grenade? Yeah, throw it. That would have been great. That would have been a comedic moment and a great action-y moment.
Yeah, or even another way to do it was that you could have, like, the ghosts all chasing, then you basically just have Patty's like, hey, run this way, and you don't see what she has yet, but then they're just like, okay, jump, and then they jump, and then ghost ship all of those ghosts. Like, that would have been something organic, like saying, where it's literally on the fly, like saying, hey, over here, over here, over here, okay, now clear.
Exactly. That would have come off to, a lot better, or even better, like, instead of the wood chipper, actually, one of the things I wanted to see was, like, new traps. Like, we got those near the end where we got, like, a ghost bear trap and things like that. It would have been cool if, like, they jumped out of the way and then there's this Trap-O-Matic 9000 just sucking them in. That would have been great.
Yeah, which that was one thing that did bother me, because they show the bear trap in the trailer, but it literally is just from the end of the film. We never actually see it in action.
Because nothing against that ghost wood chipper. My only problem with it was, like, so you're killing the ghosts again. Is this DBZ rules where they die if they died twice?
Yeah, I mean, in the internal logic, it makes some sense. They're basically just breaking them down to ectoplasm.
Yeah, but to me, I was just like, I couldn't get past the logic of, so you're killing the ghosts again. Now, with the winged demon that didn't look like a ghost, it looked like a demon, that made sense to have that happen. But, like, if you take in electric chair ghost through that, I was like, that's not make a whole lot of sense, because he could just phase through it.
Yeah, I mean, at least with the way I saw it, at least kind of, and this just may be because of the weird logic in my head, I just thought that, oh, well, maybe it did something to the particles, because obviously the ghosts were brought out because the little ghost bombs were ionizing things. I'm thinking, okay, well, it's probably what it's doing is that it's, and again, keep in mind, this is probably just how it sounded in my head, but it's like, oh, it's probably deionizing it so that way they're no longer visible to human eyes because it renders the particles that make them visible inert.
Or in some cases, like the thought that came to my mind is, how can you do this? Then explain that because of the open portal, they're not spiritual, they're corporeal. And then at that point, it's like, oh, so they can be killed. Let's have some fun, kind of thing. And they didn't explain this.
Yeah, and honestly, that could have set up for a different type of joke where they could have made a Schwarzenegger where it's like, oh, so you could say they bleed, which means we can kill it.
Exactly. And that would have been a great humor moment, because then at that point, you could have had the ready stick, heat 'em up moment with all the 4 Ghostbusters.
Yeah, and even if you wanted the tomboy engineer to basically make kind of the lame pop culture reference, that at least would have been a nice setup of like you have them do the whole technobabble explanation, and then basically like the tomboy one's like so, or you can even have Patty say, so you're basically saying if it bleeds we can kill it.
Yes. And then at that point, do re Egon and have that moment, and it's great, because then at that point the action scene is kind of justified because they're real at this point, and on top of that you have the humor still there, and you don't lose anything out of it. That's one of the reasons I don't like that action scene, is because you lose the humor element.
Yeah, and that was because there were some parts of the scene that worked, but then again the pistols is where I kind of lost me, because I'm just thinking, why would you already have the main proton pack that is shooting out the main beam? Why
would you put that away?
Or alternately, why didn't you make them all pistols so that way because if they could do that, why didn't you basically have everybody armed with the pistols?
Exactly. Or in some cases, like with Ghostbusters 2, where you had 2 of them wielding a slime pack, why didn't you have like one of them wielding a pistol and one of them wielding a shotgun and the other 2 wielding the normal
and
wands?
At the very least, having the items behave like the items they're supposed to be modeled after, like having the shotgun behave like the shotgun, having the pistols behave like the pistols, especially considering that you have nukes strapped to your back. If you're going to have like these long streams, that would basically be very dangerous because, well, you could end up crossing them and basically blowing yourself up, and it's just... that was the thing that bothered me about the action, is that have the object act like the object. You already established that the proton packs and how those work. If they're going to be pistols, have it be like pistols where there's shorter bursts. If it's going to be like a shotgun, have it be where it has to have its own proton pack, because you can only basically get like one shot, but then it has a really bad cooldown time.
Yeah, exactly. And then at that, like, have Kristen Wiig come in with the shotgun, boom, oh crap, I don't have any ammo, run around.
And sadly, my thought was like, why didn't you basically just make a noisy cricket? Because if you have like...
They did. Well, there actually was like a noisy cricket one. It just never made it into the action scene.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's where you could have had it, where you basically could have had like, okay, like this, like especially when they set it up with the whole, oh, don't use that, it hasn't been tested yet, and it could have been like the smallest one that would have been harmless, and it would have been the noisy cricket moment where it's like, oh, don't use that, it's really it's like it's really unstable, and that could be part of the reason why it has such a nasty blowback, is because it's unstable.
Exactly, and so at that point, I mean, these are ways that you could have seriously improved on the humor, and you could have improved on the action, you could have improved on the character development, all of that stuff. Because at that point, like, we're already mentioning numerous other proton packs, those can go into the character development. Like, this character prefers this one, and it would have worked so much better. In fact, I mean, you could even go complete badass with Patty and have her wielding a proton Gatling gun. I don't care.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it would make sense with the character to have that.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and even like the ghost punching fist thing, that worked a little bit. Again, the big problem is that there's no internal logic to the design of some of these weapons.
No. Well, and again, one of the other things that lends into the whole Avengers thing, that whole fist deal came off to me like, I'm Iron Man.
Yeah.
It really did. If it was going to be like actually punching the ghost, I wanted them to actually punch the ghost, not to send out a pulse that went out.
Because it wasn't even a fist; it was a stun gun basically, which it would have worked if they basically had treated it like, oh, well, this is a one burst stun gun just to get out of a jam. Yeah,
I mean, the thing that actually I thought of when I first saw it, I don't know if you've actually seen this, but there was an old Disney series called Spellbinder, where they basically would gather up static electricity and throw out balls of electricity. That's what that came off to me as. And I was like, that's dumb.
Yeah.
That's dumb in this context, because you're saying this is a proton glove. It allows you to punch ghosts. let it punch ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
Not send out a Powerball to...
I mean,
to
and especially
hit
give, like, the proper setup. Like, maybe have, like, the ghost of a boxer come out and have that be like, oh, we have a reason to use this now.
Yeah.
Because we gotta basically... And that could even tie into of a way to act, like, dealing with the ghost certain ways actually, like, unique to, okay, oh, this ghost was a boxer. The only way to get them to stop coming at you is to basically treat it like a match. It's like, okay, you've got this ghost punching
And you could have had a really great moment with either Patty or Melissa McCarthy boxing the boxer.
Yeah, and the thing is, Melissa McCarthy can do that kind of action comedy because that's what you see in Spy, which was actually done really well, also done by Paul Feig. And so it's a case of, we know that that's possible, it's just, again, it needs that internal consistency. And that's really, I think that's pretty much the biggest thing that hurts this film as a whole, is the lack of internal consistency and faith in its own story.
No, I don't even think it didn't have a universe, or enough of an established universe to have consistency. And so at that point, that's why I'm saying, like, bring in a brand new writing staff for the sequel and actually establish your universe.
Mm-hmm. And as sad as it is to say it, I understand Dan Aykroyd is passionate about it, but he's not he doesn't make the smartest decisions when it comes to films he's attached to. Case in point, Blue Brothers 2000.
Are you talking about the comments that he was making about
Not
it?
just the comments, but he very much had a guiding hand in this.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. In Geek News, we actually said, like, if this ends up where you are a part of this film, then your comments are going to seem very, very clear. And I'm sorry, guys, but that's the case here. He is every one of the cast has a vested and biased interest in this movie. Mm-hmm. So all of their comments saying, we're former cast members and this is going to be great, they're null and void. They're in the movie. They want this to be good because they're cameos in the movie.
Mm-hmm. And that's really kind of the problem with it. And so I get the feeling with something like this, I'm very much afraid that if they do continue going forward, I'm very much afraid that Dan Aykroyd might end up trying to pull a George Lucas here, where either Dan Aykroyd or Ivan Reitman, because one of the big things, which is why you had people like James Rolfe saying they weren't going to see it, is that Harold Ramis was kind of because although Dan Aykroyd was passionate, Harold Ramis was the one who was able to basically put it all together. Yeah. And without that, someone who was able to basically make it consistent and make it work, it suffers. And that's why I'm just trying to think in my mind who could write it, but I'm just thinking all the choices that Sony would use would be very terrible choices. Like, oh, let's give it to Phil Lord and Chris Miller. And I'm just like, no, you basically already wrecked 21 Jump Street, which was, and I understand, like, oh, well, it was a serious drama. Let's do it as a comedy making fun of it. But literally, that was the other thing I noticed. Like, this is basically 21 Jump Street light. Because, like, oh, let's make fun of the fact that this is a reboot. Let's make fun of the fact that people were hating on this film before it even came out. Let's make fun of the misogyny, make fun of this, make fun of that, and not actually tell our own damn story.
First things first, I would not bring anybody in from Sony stable.
No.
Don't do that. Because I don't have faith in any of them being able to write it.
Like, bring in
or direct it.
Yeah.
You want to bring in somebody who's more along the lines of freelance and also has an appreciation for the films, the series, all the stuff that came before.
My choice, J. Michael Straczynski. He's written for the Ghostbusters cartoon, so he would actually show some...
JMS I'd have no problem with.
Yeah, and so looking at it, that would be someone you could bring in, even if as some sort of maybe as someone to kind of refocus the story, because...
Has Richard Klein retired yet?
I'm not sure.
Because him and Richard Klein and JMS have worked together on Extreme Ghostbusters. They worked together on Men in Black, the series. They've worked together quite a bit, and frankly, this is why I'm kind of wondering if they're retired, because I remember hearing that Richard Klein was talking about retirement after Transformers Prime. If he's not retired, bring in this duo again, and there's a third one in there, Jeff something. Jeff
Klein? Or no, not Klein, because that was Richard Klein.
No, actually, I may be getting the names wrong, but bring in that trio again. Bring in them and have them write this.
Yeah, or at the very least, bring in the people who are writing the current run of the comics, like Ghostbusters International, people who are actually working with the material and actually have an appreciation for it. Mm-hmm. And you can keep Paul Feig, because Paul Feig is not that bad of a director. It's like, he knows what he's doing. He knows how to actually direct women. And so the director was fine, but bring in some better writers, because if it's kind of, I'm of the philosophy, and I'm going to use some language, so if you've got problems with language, if the script is shit, the film will still be shit.
Yeah, you can't save it at that point. But thankfully, if you brought in these writers and also kind of gave them the approach that, like, we're not going to approach this in a mean-spirited way in any way, shape, or form. The other thing that I would also be really worried about, and I would also state, is, look, I get Sony's funding this thing. Mm-hmm. Get the marketers out of the set. because I think a lot of decisions were made simply along the lines of being able to sell toys.
Yeah.
And that was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Look, the reason the Ghostbusters toys sold really, really, really well wasn't because you rammed them down your throats. It's because they saw the movie, they saw the series, they loved the proton packs, they wanted to have ones of their own.
I remember even I had one when Extreme Ghostbuster, like for 1 year on my birth. It was either my birthday or Christmas, and my mom didn't even really think in terms of, oh, well, let's just get it because it was very much a case of, oh, well, let's just get this because he watches this cartoon. Yeah. And so for 1 year for my birthday, she got me one of the proton pack toys, and I remember having a great deal of fun with it, although I remember taking the beam thing out because I didn't realize it was supposed to be the beam. I just kind of saw the flashlight in it, and I just figured, okay, well, I'll just aim, and I basically used my imagination.
I did it too. But, I mean, at that point, that's why I'm saying a marketer... Look, marketers, focus groups need to be away from this movie. They are not making it better, they're making it worse. So at that point, leave it up to the writers, leave it up to the director, because I honestly feel like a lot of decisions in the movie were marketing choices. They weren't director choices.
Nope.
And unfortunately, marketing is gonna have a little bit more power than the director. So at that point, get them off the freaking set.
Yeah.
Nothing against the marketers, but your place is not on set. Your place is selling the toys after the movie has come out.
Yep.
So those are a couple of things that I would do. The other thing, too, that I felt this movie didn't do well, and I'm nitpicking here, but Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2 have awesome soundtracks. This one blended horribly. I didn't even notice, like, you pointed out to me the Ghostbusters theme from Fall Out Boy. I didn't even notice that was Fall Out Boy. And frankly, all of the music that I noticed was either instrumental music that sounded like the original movies, or it was this band doing this rendition of Who You Gonna Call. You know?
Yeah. And that is, and I mean, yeah, the Ghostbusters theme, it's classic, and I did like the second version that was playing in the credits. I was like, okay, at least that one is at least trying to be in a spirit where it's actually, because I had heard the Fall Out Boy one before seeing the movie, and the problem with the Fall Out Boy one was that it didn't have that sense of fun. Yeah. But then the one we got in the credits, like, it was at least on the right track, and if people want a hard rock version of the Ghostbusters theme, well, Extreme Ghostbusters did a good version of that, where, yeah, it's hard rock and extreme, but it was still fun, and it still was Ghostbusters.
But movie 1 and 2, they actually went past that and found really great tracks from bands that fit really well. So, like, one of my favorite songs from Ghostbusters is Saving the Day. It's not associated with the movie at all. It's just a track that somebody else did, but I love Saving the Day. And especially where they put it in there, where it's the Ecto-1 driving up to the mayor's office, saving the day. That worked! And so at that point, maybe instead of trying to get Fall Out Boy to do the Ghostbusters theme, you bring in Fall Out Boy to do one of their own songs inspired by it, and then find a place to put that in the movie.
Yeah, basically do what they did with Highlander, where they basically approached Queen saying, hey, we don't want to necessarily use your music, but we have this really concept, let's show them the movie, come up with some music that you think fits it, and that's what Queen did with Highlander, is that they didn't just try to tie to specific moments, they just took, like, for example, It's a Kind of Magic, they just took the line, there can be only one, and It's a Kind of Magic from different parts of the movie, it's like, let's make that into a song.
Yeah,
and that was like, because with Queen, you basically, the reason they were so varied is because each of the members wrote their own songs that they basically brought to the band, and so you had Freddie do it one way with It's a Kind of Magic, but then you had Brian May come in another way with Who Wants to Live Forever.
Or, I mean, I think another one of those writing ones was Princes of the Universe, which eventually became, like, the TV show theme.
Yeah, pretty much the theme.
Was never intended.
Well, yeah, you know? It kind of. It was basically a case of, they showed them the movie, and they basically, okay, Queen, here's this movie, tell us what you think, then go off, come up with some stuff that you think is cool, and then they basically came back.
And we walked away with 3 awesome tracks.
Yeah, they pretty much came up with their own albums. Like, okay, well, here's pretty much the full album we came up with, because we all had different things we liked about this movie. So, Who Wants to Live Forever was nice and somber. Princes of the Universe, which I think very much was a Freddie song, where it was very much, okay, let's basically ramp this up and basically set the tone that this is going to be something that's mystical but still cool, because... And that's kind of what they need to do with Ghostbusters, that they basically... I mean, they could bring in Brian May. I wouldn't be against them going to Brian May. It's like, hey, Brian May, can you come up with something that sets the stage for this?
Well, the reason that I'm suggesting this is simply along the lines of, again, having a marketer in there. What's the marketer going to want to get? The Ghostbusters theme over and over and over again. And that's fine for like a remix CD if you want to do that.
Yeah,
but what should have happened here was you show these, you do the Queen approach. You show them the movie, and you let inspiration take its course.
Yeah, or alternately, you could do, and I hate that I'm using this as a positive example, but you do what they did with Out of the Shadows with Ninja Turtles, where they basically do a version of the Ninja Turtles theme that makes homages to the other films, where you have like the main lyrics that are from the TV theme, but then you hear in like some of the breakdowns where you hear the things like the Go Ninja Go, and various references to basically the whole legacy. You do a remix version that pays homage to basically the past films in various.
I mean, I hate to use this example, but I mean, an example of a good soundtrack here that would have made sense with Ghostbusters, at least in theory, would have been like the soundtrack for the original Transformers. Not the Steve Jablonsky score, but the fact that they showed, because I think this is how that went for the first movie, they showed these bands the movie, and then just said, come up with whatever you got. And then at that point, we got things like This Moment from Disturbed. We did get Mute Math doing a Transformers theme. We got Black Lab doing a Transformers theme. And they're fine. They're okay. I'm not fond of the Mute Math one. But you had those moments where you had the theme, but you also had all these other good songs that would fit well into the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this one didn't have that because they were so emphasized on I don't know if you noticed this, but like every time they had to do the backup shot of all four of them firing the proton packs, they always had to have the going on. It was like, you can go and get other tracks and it'll work.
I mean, sadly, the one time where they actually did that sort of thing right was in the early trailers where they had the soft piano version that was kind of like the nice little at least if in my mind, because they had the whole thing, but it was done in a very slow piano thing, and I'm thinking, okay, if they did that at the start of a new song, that would have been the new theme, but still had that nice little touch of, yes, we know that that's part of our legacy, but this is our movie.
Exactly.
Kind of go to borrow a phrase from Titus from Final Fantasy. It's like, this is my story. Like, this is my
this is my story. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. This is my story, and this is how I'm going to tell it. That's why in a lot of cases I have a feeling the music thing is also kind of built up into the marketing. Mm-hmm. Because this again sounds to me like a huge marketing decision that then was overridden via, like, Paul Feig didn't even get a choice in the matter. He had to run with it. And that's something, as far as I'm concerned, in a film you never want to do. You never override the director. You let his vision carry through.
Mm-hmm.
So I've pretty much, like, I've hammered all of the things that I disliked about the movie. But here's the thing, guys. I'm kind of where Romney is. I think it's a below average movie, but I don't think it's horrible.
Yeah, it's not because believe me, and as someone who's seen,
it's got a lot of work.
It's got a lot of work. This feels like something that could have been better, but they just needed the right people at the helm, and they sadly did not have the right people. And it's very much a case of, it's very much this. A lot of people point out that with Harold Ramis's death, that was pretty much the end. And I kind of see where they're coming from, because they're missing that strong guiding hand that kept that internal consistency. Granted, there are other writers they could bring in to bring that kind of idea back. And I know one of the major producers is Dan Aykroyd, which is why I'm thinking, which is why I'm afraid of Dan Aykroyd kind of getting too close to us, because we run into the George Lucas issue of not having that. Because the thing is, a lot of really creative people work best in pairs when they have someone who's that voice of reason. For George Lucas, that was Gary Kurtz. For Dan Aykroyd, that was Harold Ramis.
Well, and here's the thing, too, is that Harold and Dan had that repertoire. I mean, they'd been writing on Stripes before that. I believe Harold... I don't think Harold was an SNL cast member, but he was one of the writers at that point. Mm-hmm. So that's where they met. So at that point, they already had that chemistry. And Bill was a good third to that. Like, he was the actor. He wasn't writing this stuff. And so at that point, I'm actually going to say this 100%. Again, because we got so many cameos... Mm-hmm. Dan, there can be no Stan Lee cameo for this series. There can't be. You've got to step back and you've got to let this breathe on its own.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I would like to have you be the Stan Lee cameo every time, this movie proved to me that no, I don't want that. Not in the direction that they want to go about it. So at that point, I would actually dare say, Dan, I think you're a little too biased. With this, and you need to step back and let this thing grow.
Yeah, honestly, and I mean, if he does want to do the thing, maybe rather than just be a pointless cameo, it's like, well, And this is just probably me thinking, well, the cab driver obviously knew something rather than just like, oh, pointless cameo where it's just Dan Aykroyd. Follow up on that if you want to be attached to it. Then actually follow up on that. Since if you're gonna have the cab driver know that it's a Class 5 apparition, well, follow up on that. Like, how the hell does he know that?
Well, here's the way that you can get Dan Aykroyd in. And I just barely thought about this off the top of my head. Movie 2 is going to do Gozer. We can't stop that. Movie 2 is going to do Gozer. Don't have Gozer be a person. In fact, I don't even think the actor or the actress who played Gozer is around anymore.
No.
Don't have a physical actor or actress. Have him be a ghost. Have him be a CG being. Have Dan Aykroyd play him. There you go. That's how you do it.
I can see it.
You can do it. Have him play it. Like, this is one of those things where if Harold Ramis was alive today, I'd love him to play Gozer. I think he would get it. Because the voice actor allows for that concept. But do I want to see Patty's uncle back in this movie? No.
No.
Do I want to see Mr. Debunker, or do I want to see Bill Murray, Walter Peck? No. Maybe.
Maybe as a ghost, given that he very clearly died.
Did he clearly die?
Yeah, like that's why they were talking to the police. He was blasted out the window and basically fell to his death, and that's
right. Okay.
And so it's very clear that character is like deader than dead.
Yeah.
So if they do want to bring him back, they could bring him back as maybe a ghost.
CG him and have Bill Murray come in and do the voice.
Yeah, come in as a ghost that they have maybe have it be the cold open where it's the ghost of the debunker who's trying to get revenge, and they basically trap him. That'll be the cold open of the second movie.
Yeah. Let's see. But don't bring back in Janine. We don't need her back.
Nope.
Don't bring back in Sigourney Weaver. That was so
That was
dumb.
pointless. That was pointless.
That was so dumb. Don't create Slimer, or don't bring
Don't
Slimer
repurpose
back
ghosts from the previous films.
Make a new Slimer. Like, make one that is supposed to be lovable for this group of Ghostbusters. Let's see, the other cameo that I'm forgetting now. We had Janine, we had... I would actually dare say don't even bring the mayor into it either. Because this mayor was not as interesting as the mayor.
Right. And I mean, they had that the good concept that Department of Homeland Security tries to keep these things under wraps. You could build off of that.
But that builds more, have that build more into the Men in Black plot.
And even if you don't want to do the Men in Black plot, you could still have that be a thing where they have a different liaison, for example. Like someone, there's the woman who kind of was the liaison for the mayor's office. Maybe you could bring her back, but maybe not have her be the liaison to mayor. Just have bring in someone to be that liaison with the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
Someone who's kind of like the Agent Coulson almost, who's basically just someone who's there in the background.
Now I'm seeing Clark Gregg in Ghostbusters.
Honestly,
awesome.
Honestly, I could see it because you could very much have someone, or even better, if they're not going to do the Men in Black thing, you could have someone like Josh Brolin be that liaison who's just the stone-faced, the guy who just cleans up the messes. Because, if you do Tommy Lee Jones or Will Smith, that'll be too obvious. But bring in Josh Brolin and basically just have him be the one...
Or actually, this barely came to my mind, Patrick Warburton. Just have Patrick Warburton come in. We're going to take a few minutes to clean up this scene here.
Yeah, or even just have him, being kind of the stone-faced... where you have the press junk, it's like, but what about all these ghosts? It was just an industrial accident, or because I know in the original Iron Man,
we're just gonna tell you that this is a bit of a swamp gas is what happened here.
There was that was a missed opportunity where they're like, oh, you're gonna say that it was terrorists drugging the water. If they had Patrick Warburton deliver it instead of having the reporter say it, if you just had it was just terrorists happened to spike our water, we managed to contain it, managed to get it all clear, you just needed to stick onto bottled water for a little bit.
Yeah, so at that point you could have had great moments that would have made a lot more sense than what this movie actually tried to do. But again, this is all writers. We need better writers. We need the director to be able to actually be the director. Mm-hmm. We need marketing out of the set.
Yeah, wait for the film to be done before you do your work. I understand that can backfire in some regards with things like Red Tails, but you know how to market a Ghostbusters movie. So let them do their thing. You do your thing once you have the final product.
Mm-hmm. Instead of criticizing it into the ground. And here's the thing, too. When you get your final cut, that's the final cut. Don't immediately start saying, no, we need this ice cream bar in there because this and that contract. Nope. We're done. That's what you're advertising.
Well, yeah, there's not necessarily anything wrong with, say, product placement, because that's how movies get funded. So if you're going to have product placement, but don't call attention to it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you end up with, that awkward Truman Show thing where the woman and this is like in a universe where the woman's like, oh, have this brand of coffee, and it's like in the middle of what's supposed to be an intense argument.
See, and stuff like that just makes me go right back to the Wayne's World scene where we got all the product placement and the problem with it. But no, that's one of those things where, again, the final cut, marketing has no influence over. They have to work things around it. That's what they have to do. And
Yep.
I think that's how you fix this franchise and actually make it worthwhile. I think every actress in this movie has the potential to make this work, as long as good writing is behind them. You know, that's one of those things. They're comedians. Have them write their own jokes, for crying out loud. They've been doing it for years. So I think, have we hammered this into the ground?
I think so. I think we've pretty much made the point pretty clear. I mean, at the end of it, it's not the worst movie in the world. You see glimmers of a good movie being hindered by marketing decisions and fan service, and just, again, it's the new Devil May Cry scenario where it's basically they had their idea, but now that they pissed off the fan base, they're trying so desperately to win back the old fan base instead of having the Covenants to just steer the ship ahead and basically bring in a new fan base.
Yeah.
Kind of like what Star Trek did. It was like, this is a new universe, we're doing our thing.
Yeah. I mean, the perfect example is I'm starting to get a lot of respect for directors and writers who don't give a crap about we as a public think.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Because that's kind of how you need to handle this now online culture where everything that comes out is going to be scrutinized.
And that's why I like how Simon Pegg's been handling it with Star Trek Beyond. Like, this is our story, and they can be and the key thing is be respectful about it. Don't try to piss off the fan base like Michael Bay and Megan Fox, where Simon Pegg is just like, this is our story. We respectfully disagree with George Takei, or we respectfully disagree with these opinions, but it shows that be respectful, but still
steer the course.
Stay the course. Stick to your guns.
Exactly. So at that point, this movie, I think, will be okay for people. I think it'll be a good popcorn flick for kids.
Pretty much matinee or dollar theater is where I would put it. Don't pay more than
I can't justify.
Yeah, don't pay more than $5.
I can't justify more than dollar theater. This is a D movie as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And it's a real shame, because I see Hollywood executives saying, oh, see, people don't want women leading in films. They're going to basically miss the entire
that's
point.
Kind of the thing that I'm kind of worried about is going to happen in the comments here, is that, we've given, legitimate criticism on how to fix it. Mm-hmm. We're going to be misogynists. We're going to be sexist. We're going to be I'm going to be racist because apparently I hate Patty, and actually I think Patty's one of the best parts of the movie.
Yeah.
So
that's the problem. And I keep hating to plug my brother's... Well, not that I hate it. It's just...
You hate your brother. You're anti-family, mister!
No, well, it's just... Again, it's just mainly because he was the one who kept bringing a lot of the tidbits, but then there's just these discussions about nuance or lack thereof. And you know what? I'm just going to link to his whole, prose article on his blog, Shame on the Universe, that pretty much talks about why we need nuance, or the fact that nuance has disappeared, because that pretty much is the only rebuttal I can give to anybody who will jump to the knee-jerk reaction of, oh, you're a misogynist, or, oh, you're anti-male because you say you like parts of this movie, or aren't completely condemning it, or, oh, you're not a true fan. It's just, people, it's never that simple. It never is. And so I'm just going to link to my brother. This is my brother's article who wrote this, because it pretty much makes all the points that I could take the time to make, but he does it in a much better, much more concise way than I could, because he took the time to write it and organize the thoughts. And this thing's already an hour already, so...
Well, and at least you can look at this from the right way, and this is the great way to lead things out. Unlike Ghostbusters, we're not going to feed the trolls.
Nope. I already have enough Rob Zombie ones to deal with. I don't need any more. And I don't know why.
I already have enough Destowrious people to deal with.
Yeah, point being, we get enough thrown at us, and the sad part is we're probably so below most people's radars that we may not even draw that many aside from the dedicated trolls. Yeah. But then we'll know that they're the dedicated trolls.
Oh, good to see you back, George. Or
yeah.
Whatever. And no, I don't know why I did the thumbs up. I just did it.
Yeah, because for those of you who are hearing this, because this is audio, Adam thumbs up the microphone as if it had a camera.
I do it all the time. So yeah, I think I'm gonna do it. We're an hour in. So like Ghostbusters, don't like Ghostbusters, leave a comment and let us know what you think. And
and you've already seen our ratings on the review proper, so. Yeah, pretty much what you guys think. Was there anything about the film that you noticed while watching that maybe we missed? Something that was either good or bad?
We didn't even mention.
I mean, do you think my whole idea of them doing a crossover with Men in Black makes sense? And if anybody from Sony is looking for a new writer, I'm non-union.
There's a good writer here.
Yeah, I'm non-union, so you don't have to worry about dealing with the WGA just yet. I don't know how well that'll go if you're a union production, but hey, I got nothing else to do.
I'm your reference, man. I will totally reference you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's good.
I'm almost thinking we should just make like our own Ghostbusters Men in Black trailer just after all of this. Just like, granted, that'll be like way down the line. We don't want to run into the Genshiken issue of us running ourselves ragged, but
well, that and I need some serious work on my Tommy Lee Jones because I want to do Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You know where to find my stuff. You're literally on the channel, which is youtube.com/StudioGhostUtah. If you want to see geek news, reviews, and opinions, you can go over to youtube.com/Drac2326. That is where the Geek News Show is hosted. So if you want to see the backlog of episodes and kind of go back and see how far we've been tracking this, because we were talking about this way back at Radio SLCC.
Yeah, and not a lot of that is in the YouTube archive, but a good portion of it is. It's one of those things where, unfortunately, the backlog of Radio SLCC episodes, a lot of it made it in there, but a lot of it didn't. So, but I think all the Ghostbusters ones are in there, and it's been kind of a struggle to get all of the backlogged stuff from Radio SLCC. So we'll get that up there eventually, and that's where the full archive can be gotten. You can also go to geekyweek.podomatic.com for a more recent archive, like over the last couple of months. I know that there hasn't been a whole lot of uploads to that, but there's a couple of reasons behind it that I don't want to get into.
Yeah, let's just say
I'm having some issues with Podomatic.
It's basically technical difficulties. We'll basically leave it at that.
Yeah, so like I have some of these episodes edited, but I'm having some issues with Podomatic. And then also, feel free to check out all the other content that I have on my channel, because I do more than just Geek News. Nothing against Romney.
Yeah, because, there's the Drac Let's Plays, there's Gaming with the Geeks, there's quite a few other things that he does. I know that there's the whole, Tales of Drac Food that you've been doing as well.
Yeah, so, because this summer is going to be Drac's Summer of World of Warcraft. So, in honor of the next expansion, Legion, coming out next month, I'm doing a bunch of WoW content that is going to be both Legion beta coverage, top 10s, top 5s, as well as the Tale of Drakfu, which is a Let's Play of World of Warcraft. I do Let's Plays, I do game reviews, I do live streams, and also I do Gaming with the Geeks with these wonderful YouTubers. We already have 2 of them going, and the third is actually getting ready to start up, and it involves Romney.
Which is why we were doing this collab, to kind of tease into that. I don't know whether or not this is going to end up on Podomatic or not, but point being, this end slate's kind of gone on pretty long, so yeah, if you like what you heard or saw in terms of the main review and this discussion, if you want more of this in the future, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Agree, disagree, have a different opinion you want to bring into to what we discussed for this particular outing. Well, let us know. But with that, that's pretty much the end of this freeform episode of Romney's Discussions. I don't know what will be going up next time, but all I will say is that thank you for listening. We'll see you all next time. I don't know why I did the hand thing. I did it too.
See, you're doing it too. This is what happens.